I was sitting in a circle with a bunch of entrepreneurs, and they were discussing how to use content to connect with their followers. This one guy specifically was a little bit stuck on how to take what he was working on, his business, and make that interesting to the rest of the world. So as you can imagine, the room lit up because everybody loves to be asked about ideas, and that dude was getting thrown tons of different series ideas, promotional videos, hooks. Have you ever thought of this? Have you ever thought of that? And at first, I could see him jotting down ideas, and he seemed genuinely excited, like, hey, I've never thought about that before. But after a while, I saw it settle in. The overwhelm. Have you ever been there? So many ideas, too many ideas, and the countless amount of voices telling you what you should do. So with all these trails, how do you know which one to spend your time, your precious time, following? I ended up sharing with this guy a tip that I have learned from countless professional creatives about how they pick which idea to follow and deal with their own overwhelm. And honestly, it has saved my butt over and over again. Creative restriction. I first heard about this from Rick Rubin in his book, A Creative Act, and then I started noticing it everywhere. Professional creatives use some kind of restriction to make them more creative, to make them more productive, to make their work better. Examples of creative restriction is time limits, word limits, perimeters on how big the art piece can be or how long the song can be, or maybe it's series ideas where you only do a certain type of video and for a certain amount of time. Tools, limiting what tools you can use. Ironically, giving ourselves perimeters and boundaries and restrictions forces our brains to become more creative, and something really cool happens. But more on that later. Now, I can hear some fear coming up in your head. Trust me, I've had it myself, particularly around how in the world would I actually be more creative using less. This idea comes from Kane, who is the author of Hook Point. Listen to what he has to say.
You know, the top creators on the planet is really mastery of a single format. I started my career in the film industry, and the past 80 plus years, every movie follows the same 3-act structure in terms of how they tell their stories. And it's not like Steven Spielberg, every time he makes a movie, he's reinventing the 3-act structure. He's innovating within that structure. He's mastering the qualitative elements of it. And that makes him one of the best storytellers on the planet. Now, if he was reinventing the 3-act structure every time he made a movie, he probably wouldn't be as good of a storyteller as he is today. You look at Mr. Beast, for example, is like he's mastering the fine nuances within the structure of the videos that he's doing. He's not completely shifting gears all the time. A good friend of mine, Alex Stemp, has 20 million followers on TikTok, and he approaches random strangers in the street and offers them professional photo shoots. You know, he's been using that format for, sure, 3+ years to amass a followership of 20 million people. So what I would say is really identify that format that you're excited about and make the innovation come within that format and mastering that. Because
so good.
It's going to be very difficult to become a master storyteller if you're just switching the format up consistently.
Ironically, we think we're limiting ourselves by setting rules and perimeters, but check out this idea from previous guest George Sidiropoulos.
You need a structure to operate within. And the creativity part is how can you make that more interesting for you, but also more interactive, more efficient. And that only comes as soon as you set the rules of the game. And you're like, okay, this is how we're going to play. Let's take this whole game and this whole system to its greatest level. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. Now, here's the big one for me. What if I do the same thing over and over again because I'm adding creative restriction? Is it possible that people will get sick of me doing the same thing? But this is the advice that I got from content creator and actor Adam Rose.
I stopped feeling like I had sort of boxed myself in and all of a sudden felt more like I was standing on top of a box. You know what I mean? Like I had built this thing that I can now stand on and go, okay, now what do I want to do? And the world is my oyster. And that's when things really started picking up.
Now, here's what's wild. I did not expect this to happen when I started adding creative restriction as a part of my process. It actually gave me tangible things to measure to know if I was getting better. If you do something with restriction, you know the variables within those walls, and you can look at each variable and improve it in a calculated and intentional way, as opposed to spraying and praying and not really knowing what's working and what's not. It's wild that sometimes to get more creative, we need to be more restricted. So I hope this helps. If you're feeling overwhelmed, maybe it's time to get a little more restricted in your life. If you'd like to hear these full conversations I had with these previous guests, the links are down in the show notes if you're watching on YouTube. Drop me a comment and let me know what you think about those. Maybe what's a way that you use creative restriction.